Hello, hello. Thank you so much for being here. Gosh, it is such an honor. First ever Young Leaders Summit. You guys are taking your Saturday to be here, and I'm just so excited to hopefully be able to encourage and equip you. I'm feeling like very rallied after Lila's speech. I'm feeling like I could do anything and accomplish anything. And so I'm so thankful for that. And that's what really today is about, just making sure that you guys have the confidence, that you have the courage that you need to fight in this battle that's typically referred to as a culture war. It's typically referred to as some kind of political battle, and that's what it's seen as. All of you guys in this room have experienced those conversations, not just on social media or online, but probably with your family and friends, particularly when it comes to the issue of abortion, but perhaps when it comes to gender and all of these issues, that's divisive. That's divisive. That's polarizing. We certainly hear this, I think, within the church. Now, I'm an evangelical. I'm not sure if it's the same way in the Catholic Church, but that's a divisive political issue. That's not an issue that we want to discuss from the pulpit. That's not really an issue that we want to highlight. That's not something that you need to bring up at the dinner table. If you disagree about abortion with your friends, then you can kind of just let it go by the wayside. Very popular Bible teachers, very popular Christian influencers won't touch these issues like abortion, like gender, like the definition of marriage and family, like reproductive technology, because it is divisive. Now, here's where they're right, and here's where they are wrong. They're right that it is divisive because the truth divides. And the truth has always divided. There has always been a divide between what is true, what is not. There has always been a divide between light and darkness and evil and good. Yes, the truth is divisive. But the truth is also worth it. And here's where they are wrong when they say, I don't want to get into politics. I'm talking about Christians who would call themselves pro-life. I don't want to get into politics because it's divisive. It might turn someone off, or it might turn someone away, or I might not be able to fill my pews, or maybe they'll be mad at me and we won't be friends anymore, or they'll say bad things about me, or I won't be able to convince them of Christianity in general if I turn them off because of my views on these issues. Here's what I remind them, and I'll remind you, and Lila beautifully articulated this and alluded to this already, that for the Christian, when we're talking about things like abortion, we're talking about things like the definition of gender and family, and all those things really go hand in hand. We are not primarily talking about political issues. We are not primarily talking about culture war issues. We are primarily talking about biblical issues. We are talking about Genesis issues. Even more than that, we are talking about Genesis 1 issues. And even more than that, we are talking about Genesis 1:1 issues that God created the heavens and the earth. Because if God created the heavens and the earth, if He is the creator of all of it, He is also the authority over all of it. Which means He defines what is and what isn't, what's right and what's wrong, what's true and what's false, what's male, what's female, and tells us when life begins. That goes all the way back to the very first verse of the first chapter of the first book of the Bible. God created the heavens and the earth. Therefore, He is the creator and the definer of all things, including the value of the image bearer of God, starting at the earliest point of its creation, the earliest point of its conception. We see how much that matters to God further along in that first chapter of the Bible, Genesis 1:27. God made them in His image. In His image, He created them. Male and female, He created them. It was like He knew that one day that was going to be called into question. And He was like, just so we're clear, from the very beginning, I'm literally putting it in the very first chapter. So if you lose interest after this chapter, at least you know this. That human beings are made in God's image and they are made male and female. This is what it means to be human. that you are set apart in your value, in your worth from everything else in creation, more than the plant, more than the animal, that the tiniest child, that the disabled person, that the elderly person, that the weak person, that the poor person, that the black person, that the white person, that all of you are of equal value and are of so much more value than any plant, any animal, any other part of creation. And also defined what it means to be human, embodied as human, in male and female. And there he didn't just define what gender is, he also defined what marriage is. He defined what a family is right there in the very first chapter of the Bible. So for Christians who say, no, I can't talk about that stuff. I can't talk about marriage. I can't talk about, the importance of having a mom and a dad. I can't talk about abortion. I can't talk about gender. Let me just move on to the other stuff. You're missing the foundation of it. You're missing the foundation of everything. Because you know what is much more controversial than these truths that we find in the very first chapter of the Bible? The gospel is more controversial than that. So you are not going to be able to convince me that you are bold enough to share the gospel, that Jesus is the only way, only truth, only life, and that no one can come to the Father except through him, but you are not bold enough to repeat what it says in the first chapter of the Bible about the value of life, about the definition of marriage and family. You're not going to be able to convince me of that. So unfortunately, what we're facing, not just in the culture, but in the church specifically, among Christians specifically, is yes, some confusion, but more than anything, a lot of cowardice. I think in the world there is confusion. In the outside world, there's a lot of deception, absolutely, just not knowing what an abortion is, crazily enough. But in the church, those of us who know better, they're not willing to stand on these truths simply because they are scared. Simply because they are scared. And what we need to realize is that these are not primarily political issues. Politics matter, of course. As I often say, politics matter because policy matters, because people matter. They matter to God and they matter to us. But these are not primarily political issues. They are biblical issues, and they happen to be a matter of life and death. And I haven't always thought this way. So I have a lot of compassion for the cowardly Christian. I have a lot of compassion for the ignorant person. I have a lot of compassion and understanding for the person who is afraid to stand up for what they know is true. My mind has changed a lot over the past few years. I've always considered myself pro-life. I've always considered myself conservative. And yet, even just a few years ago, I would have said, sure, I'm pro-life, but sure, I'm against abortion, except. And it was the truth and the courage of people around me who pushed me into a better and more righteous and more biblical position. And not just when it comes to abortion, also when it comes to reproductive technology, also when it comes to the definition of marriage and the family, and also when it comes to many of these issues that I once thought were too controversial, were too divisive, were too polarizing to really talk about. So let me tell you a little bit about how and why my mind changed on these things. And I just want to encourage you that you have the same power, the same ability to be able to speak the truth in love and to change people's hearts and minds. Because that's what the long game is, right? It's not just about this election. Elections really matter. But if we look at Roe v. Wade, that was half a century. That was the long game of passing the baton of truth and love before we saw the overturning of Roe v. Wade. So I want you to think that way. And let me tell you exactly how this can happen by speaking to my own experiences. So over the past few years, as I have become what I would call radically more pro-human, radically more pro-family and pro-baby, I've come to a few conclusions. One, abortion is always wrong. One, abortion is always wrong. As I said a few years ago, I believed that there should be exceptions. Of course, I thought, that's the sophisticated and compassionate position, the nuanced position. So often nuance is actually just used as a fancy excuse for confusion and cowardice. And that's what it was for me. I believed that abortion should be allowed in cases of rape and incest and maybe some other cases of fetal anomalies too. And look, this was probably 2016, so not that long ago. And when I was a public figure saying that I was pro-life, and you know what changed my mind? Was a Facebook comment. So many times we think, oh, all of my time arguing in Facebook comments or Instagram comments or on TikTok, that's time wasted. It is not. Maybe you shouldn't be doing that all day, every day. But you can change someone's mind. And listen, this person who commented on my Facebook post, I don't remember her name. I don't remember what I said in the Facebook post, but I do remember what she said. And she said, what is the difference between a baby who is conceived in rape and a baby that's not? Why would we allow abortion dependent upon the circumstances surrounding someone's conception? And I thought, I never thought about it like that. Here I am, a pro-lifer in the public sphere who is constantly trying to convince people to see the abortion issue from the perspective of the baby, and I was not thinking of it from the perspective of the baby. I was thinking of, this is just what I've been told. This is the nuanced, sophisticated position. That completely changed my mind on a dime. I realized that doesn't make any logical sense. It makes no moral sense. It makes no biblical sense to be for murder in some cases. It doesn't make sense. So that's a conclusion that by the power of the Holy Spirit, but also through the courage of someone willing to speak the truth in love on the general hellscape that is Facebook, that ended up changing my mind. And thankfully, this is the domino effect of speaking the truth in love. I have also, by the grace of God, been able to change other people's minds on that. And I'm sure it is continued to go and go and go. So you never know. You never know what your comment, what your message, what your conversation, what your offhand remark might do in planting the seeds in someone's mind to change them, to change their perspective. And here's the thing, another way I want to encourage you, you may never know. You may never know the fruit that your courage and that your consistent speaking up is bearing. You might not see the constellation of the effects of your courage until you get to glory, until we're on the other side of eternity. God may not reveal that to you right now. That person that you talked to outside the abortion clinic, that person that you got in a hopefully kind but heated exchange with on social media, that family member who has now decided to cut you out of their life because they can't believe that you're one of those radical pro-lifers, you may never know that one day in 50 years, the seed that was planted by your courage is only then taking root and is blossoming. And yet, even if we never know the fruit that our courage is bearing, it is worth it. Because there are really two reasons, well, a few reasons, maybe three. Yeah, I'll say three reasons to continue to speak the truth in love, particularly when it comes to abortion. One, it is obedient to God. That's what Ephesians 4:14-16 tells us, that we speak the truth in love. So it's obedient to God, no matter if a mind is ever changed. Two, it can change someone's mind and heart. And then three, because of that, it can actually save lives. It can save lives. And so these are the reasons why we have to continue saying the radical and controversial and divisive things that actually matter and that are actually true. Now, here's another position that I've been very public about over the past few years that is probably, I've probably caught more heat from talking about this than anything else, but I know that I'm with a lot of like-minded people, and maybe all of you are already on this same page, but I'm telling you this is not true of the larger conservative movement. And that is that IVF and that much of the reproductive technology industry, including surrogacy, including egg selling, including sperm selling, in all cases is unethical. It's unethical and it's immoral for the very same reasons that I have for being against abortion, is that those babies from the earliest point of conception, from that embryonic stage, that they are image bearers of God, and because they are human, they are entitled to human rights, the foremost of those rights being the right to not be murdered. And the truth is, there is no IVF industry in the United States without the discarding, the killing, the abandonment, the indefinite freezing of embryos. It doesn't exist without that unethical practice. So if we as pro-lifers believe what we say we do, that life starts at conception, and that there is never a good reason to murder a baby, to murder a child, to murder this defenseless, innocent human being, then we have to start thinking more critically, more ethically, more morally about practices like IVF. And when it comes to surrogacy, and when it comes to things like sperm selling and egg selling, of course, there are ethical issues with that, and removing the process of conception and the process of fertilization away from its proper context. But it's also because I have become convinced. There was one point where maybe I was a silly high schooler where I thought that I didn't believe this, but it's become so much more important to say now that children have a right to a mother and father. Children are entitled to their mother and father. And surrogacy, egg selling, sperm selling, it creates a broken situation in which we are purposely, intentionally creating motherless and fatherless children. There are really few things more evil than that. When we look throughout Scripture, what we see is that that category of fatherlessness is a category of oppression. It's a category of vulnerability. We read beautifully throughout Scripture that God is a father to the fatherless, that he takes up the cause of the fatherless and the widow. As an aside, that shows us how important men are in our society, that these are categories of vulnerability, of oppression. But of course, in biblical times, that would have happened through some sort of tragedy. Now we are purposely manufacturing fatherless children, and we're calling it empathy. We are purposely creating and conceiving fatherless children when it comes to sperm selling and two women raising a child, or a single woman raising a child. We are purposely creating these fatherless children, and we're calling it compassion, and we're calling it inclusion, and we're calling it tolerance. And then we're doing this historically unheard of practice of also creating motherless children through surrogacy, through egg selling, two men, one man raising a child. We are purposely creating motherless children. We are purposely, in the name of empathy and love and inclusion and tolerance, creating motherless and fatherless children in some grand progressive social experiment, pretending that these lives don't matter. I don't even know, and I really don't want to know, what it's going to look like when those chickens come home to roost. A generation of purposely motherless and fatherless children. We are creating purposely oppressed children in the name of love, and I worry about what the future looks like because of that. And so as pro-lifers who believe that these vulnerable people, that they are people, that they have rights, that they have dignity, we have to care not just about what happens to them after conception, but what happens to them during conception. We have to care about their rights as people. And that puts us in some very controversial territory. And I was not always there. I, similar to a lot of you, similar to most of my friends and a lot of people in my audience, had never thought about IVF before. I had never thought about reproductive technology. I think the easy thing to do is, well, I'm just excited that people get to have babies. I'm just excited that there is going to be a life. People get to have parents because, of course, wanting to have children is a beautiful desire. It's a noble desire. It's a biblical desire. But it took the wisdom of some other people, some reading, some difficult books, and to examining scripture to realize how wrong I was to be apathetic about that. That this is a cause that pro-lifers have to take up if we believe what we say we do. And that will probably make you more enemies than anything else, including in the conservative arena, including in the Republican Party. Because we've seen just over the past few weeks how Republicans have decided to double down on this without even thinking that is completely inconsistent with pro-life logic. And the reason why Christians are called to this radical and divisive defense of children, of speaking the truth in love when it comes to these biblical issues, when it comes to these issues of family, of marriage, of life, and of love, is because this is what Christians have always been about. From the inception of the church has changed how the world sees children. There's this very fascinating book by a historian, O.M. Bakke, called When Children Became People. And he's analyzing Christianity in ancient Greece and Rome. And at that time, children were on the margins, as they are in many ways still today, but they were used as sex slaves. There was such a high infant mortality rate that they really weren't seen as valuable and cute and cuddly and dignified the way so many of us see them today. Children were really pushed to the side. They were used for forced labor. They were used for exploitation. At best, they were seen as people that you could pass your wealth down to. At worst, they were seen as objects. And he analyzes how Christianity, and specifically the gospel, changed that completely. This gospel who brought in this radical message of equality that said we are all image bearers of God. We all matter. And actually, the most vulnerable among us deserves the most care. So rather than pushing the woman or the child or the elderly, or the sick, or the poor, or the slave off to the margins of society, actually we need to bring them in and help them more. It was Christians who started the hospitals. It was Christians who started the orphanages. It was Christians who started adopting the children. It was Christians who started the homeless shelters. It was Christians who started organizations to serve and to help the poor, to uphold the cause of the widow. That has been the cause of the church since its inception for 2,000 years, and we cannot stop now. We have always been a refuge of clarity and courage in a confusing and cowardly and chaotic world. We have always been the beacon of light that the most vulnerable can run to in a storm. That is what the church has always been. We created this concept of children as dignified and vulnerable, worthy to be taken care of. Christians created that idea, and it radicalized and revolutionized Western civilization forever. And that is still our job today. We are simply carrying the baton that Christians have carried for thousands of years and taking up the cause of the most vulnerable. Wherever Christians have set our feet in every part of the world, child sacrifices come to an end. Pagan practices like cannibalism have come to an end. Human sacrifice has come to an end because of the power of the gospel and the strength of Christians to say, no more. No more child sacrifice. No more sacrificing to Moloch, because we are here and we will not allow it. And we will do everything that we can through the power of the gospel to change your heart and mind. And in the meantime, we are going to take any method necessary to protect the lives of the most vulnerable. That was true for Christians under Nero. That's true for Christians under Newsom. And so what we are doing in some ways is not radical because it's what Christians have always done. We've always simply told the truth. We have always fought for the equal worth and equal value and equal rights of human beings, as Lila mentioned, from slavery abolition to so many other scenarios around the world, to abortion and to reproductive technology today. And that way, it's not radical, it's very normal for the Christian, but it's always going to be radical for the world. It's always going to put you in a place of enmity with the world. It's always going to set you against the world, because the world is deceived, and Satan loves death, and he loves lies, and he loves darkness, and darkness hates the light. If you've ever been asleep and someone comes in and turns the lights on, are you happy? No, you're like, turn the lights back off. This hurts my eyes. Well, think about that the next time that you are engaging with someone who is deluded by the darkness of the lies of abortion, the lies of progressivism. No one likes the lights on, but once your eyes adjust, you realize how much better it is to be in the light than be in the darkness. So I just want to remind you that your courage matters, that it does something, that it can bear fruit, that you may or may not see right now, but it is worth it. And one day, this is the real motivation, this is the real comfort, this is the real confidence. One day, there will be no more darkness. There will be no more deception. There will be no more abortion. There will be no more murder, because there will be no more sin. There will be no more death. There will be no more sorrow. There will only be hope and joy and light and peace, because Jesus is coming back. And at the end of the day, that's what matters. That's what our sights are set on. Not just this election, not even just the next 50 years. Our eyes are set on eternity. And therefore, every step we take, every truth we tell matters, not just here, but forever. Thank you so much.